Once you have your supplies, and I hope you've seen my video on supplies, it's time to set up your palette. You will also make a color map, learn how to use your brushes, color mixing, setting up your supplies, and cleanup. Learning good habits will save you time and frustration and make painting a lot more enjoyable. So let's get started. My video on supplies shows you everything you need, so get your supplies ready, and here we go. First, let's set up the palette. Your palette should always have a lid on it, like this one does, so that you can save the colors when you're done painting. This one has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 20 wells. Wells are just where you put the paint. So what I want you to do first is lay out colors like I'm going to do. And we're going to start with reds. And the first color, I don't want you to put them in the wells yet, just lay them around your palette. The first one is cadmium red. And that's a nice warm red. The second one is alizarin crimson, which is a cool red. So now you have a warm red and a cool red. Because I have enough wells in the palette, I'm going to skip a space or two now and then. And that way, if you want to add some more colors later, you can kind of put them in a logical order. So I've skipped a couple spaces here, and then the next one is cadmium yellow, followed by lemon yellow. And cadmium yellow is a warm yellow. Lemon yellow is a cool yellow. Lemon yellow has just a tiny tint of green in it. And that's what makes it a little bit cooler than the cadmium yellow. Then I'm going to skip a space and go right into what I call earth tones. And the first one is yellow ochre. And then that's a grayed yellow. And it's actually part of the yellow family. It just has some gray mixed in with the yellow. It's a nice color to mix with. The second earth tone is burnt sienna. That's a very warm brown. And the third one is raw umber. And that's a cool brown. It has a little bit of blue added to it. The last one of the earth tones is burnt umber. And that again is a warmer brown, but I basically have it on my palette because of value. It's a much darker brown, and I enjoy mixing rich darks with it. Then I'm going to skip a well here. And this is olive green, and it's a nice neutral green, a little bit on the warm side, and mine, as are almost all of these colors, are Winsor Newton. There's a couple Holbeins in there, but mainly they're Winsor Newton colors. Now I'm just putting one green on this palette because I mix most of my greens with either yellow and blue, or using olive with blue or olive with green. So I mix a lot of the greens myself, but sometimes I use olive green right out of the tube. So that's one of my favorite colors. Then I'm going to skip another well and go right to the blues. And this is cerulean blue, and it's a blue probably that I use the most. And it is considered, by me at least, a cool blue. Now, some artists think of cerulean as a little bit warmer color. But compared to the next color I use, which is ultramarine blue, cerulean blue is a little bit cooler. Now, different artists see color temperature a little differently. All of us see colors a little bit different. But so if I call this a cool color, somebody else might call it a neutral or a warm color. but I consider it a cool blue. That's cerulean. And like I said, the next blue is ultramarine blue, and it's a warm, dark blue. Then I'm going to skip another space, and the last two are violets. There's mineral violet is the darker one here, and cobalt violet is a lighter violet right here. Now I have these on my palette mainly because of value. I like to have a light violet and a dark violet. So cobalt violet is a lighter value, and mineral violet is a darker value. These are the colors I use. There's a lot more colors that you can use, that you can add, that you'll probably like, but this is a good setup to get started with. But I just want to say that there are a lot of artists who use fewer colors and a lot of artists who use more colors. But this is a nice arrangement because I have a warm and cool of each color. If you have favorite colors that you like to use, that you're used to, please put them on the palette wherever you want and put them right into the exercises that we're going to do. Okay, we've gone through the colors and they're all arranged properly, and now I'll show you why I wanted you to lay them out like this first before you squeeze any color into the palette. I'm using the first color here, which is cadmium red. That's just to show you about how much paint would be proper to put out. So, just put the tube right back where it was. Then you'd take the next color, squeeze out about the same amount, skip a well, put the next color in. And what I want you to do while you're doing this is make what I call a map, which is just a drawing of the palette with the right number of wells, and then label each well with the color you put in it. And I even put a dot of the color on here. So it's cadmium red, alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, so forth. This is really handy because it helps you learn the names of each of the colors, and also when you start to run out of a color, you don't have to guess about what it was and what color to put back into the well. So make a map like this, label each color, put a dot of the color on there, and it'll be really helpful. And you'll be able to use it a lot until you get all the colors memorized. I actually have more colors on my studio palette than what I have laid out here, but you should start with just a few colors and really learn how to use those, how they mix with each other, how they react with water and all of that, before you start adding a lot of other colors. I also have a video on color mixing, and I hope you'll watch that because it has a lot of exercises on color mixing, and it'll really help you move forward. If you can't find some of the colors that I've suggested, don't worry about it. Ask your local art supply dealer what would be a good substitute or what they would recommend. These colors work great for me, but they're not the only ones on the market. I'm going to quickly show you how I mix colors, and as I explain in the video on color mixing, your colors should be moist so that when you go into them like this, you can easily lift out color. So I've rinsed the brush to make sure it's clean. I'm putting down some lemon yellow. Then I rinse the brush again. And this is cerulean blue. I'm going to put some of it down, and then I just barely move the colors together like that. There's also a video on brushwork, which I think you would find really interesting and educational. But the point is, don't stir the colors up on the palette and don't stir them up on the paper. Just push them together on the palette so you can see some of the yellow and some of the blue and some of the green that they mix. And just practice making swatches or squares like that. Always work on a flat surface. Later on, as you've been painting longer, you can try working on an angle if you like. I like working that way. Gravity comes into play a little bit and pulls the color and water down. Now let's talk about how to use your brush. Every watercolor brush has a balance to it. So don't hold it down here like this, like you would a pencil or a pen, because then your hand is in the painting and your fingers are too close to the end of the brush. Hold it back here. There'll be some kind of a balance to it. It'll be more comfortable. It's just weighted a little bit more towards the painting end of the brush, and it works better that way. So I'm going to show you now just a little bit on color mixing. First, you want to get the brush nice and rinsed out, then shake it like this, snap it so that some of the water comes off. And then go to the first color. I'm using yellow ochre. You should be able to get the paint out easily without scrubbing. If you have to scrub, then it's too dry. You need to moisten the paint. After I put the first color down, I come back, rinse the brush out, shake some of the water out of it, and then go to the next color. And I'm barely going to put them together like this. I'm not going to stir them up very much. This is ultramarine blue with yellow ochre. And it makes an interesting green, but the point is, here on the palette, you can see both colors and then how they're pushed together. It's not all stirred up. And the same way here on the watercolor paper, you can see bits of blue, bits of yellow ochre, and then the green that they mix. That's much better. This is what people have a tendency to do. They stir the color up too much. And when you put it on the paper, you just get a flat, uninteresting color. So don't stir the colors up on the palette. Don't stir them up on the paper. Put them down with as few strokes as possible. This is all covered completely and with more information on a video I have on color mixing. Now let's practice stroking the brush. So I'm just grabbing some yellow paint to practice with. What I want you to do is hold the brush like I said, place the point of the tip right where you want the paint, press down, slide, and lift. That way you'll get a fairly even stroke, and usually where the stroke begins is going to be the darkest part of the stroke. Now I'm just using another color, and I want you to practice using the brush, pressing, lifting, pressing again, lifting, so you get the idea of how the paint piles up as you go, what happens when you press a little bit harder. Here's another stroke that you can practice. I've cleaned my brush out again. Try turning the brush left and right as you go, just to see what happens. And if you want to block in an area, I just got a little bit more paint. Do it slowly like this, and don't scrub. Keep moving the brush in one direction. Don't go back and forth like this, because that just tears up the brush. Now, this has got about the right amount of water to paint in it. If it has too much water in it, I'll show you, I ought to add a little bit more water to it. If it has too much water in the mixture, it's harder to control like this, and the colors bleed out more towards the edge. That's how you can tell there's too much water in it. Now, if you have gobs of paint, they'll just pile up on there, and that's not good either, because then you have chunks of paint in the painting, more like that. And these are still moist, so there's not a lot of paint piling up on there. But if the colors just pile up on there and you can't move them around very well, then you're not using enough water. Don't be in a hurry when you're practicing this. Make the strokes deliberate. Do them over and over again. Study your map so that you know where each of the colors are, and so that you can add colors as you go without wondering where they belong. Practice rinsing the brush out, shaking it or wiping it on a cloth, then going in, picking up some of the paint, putting it down without stirring it up, rinsing the brush out again, shaking it or wiping it, put another color down, and just barely move the two together like that. Practice that over and over, and it'll just move your progress along that much faster. Now for cleanup, this is when I use the spray bottle, not only to moisten the paint and keep it moist, but to spray the palette so that I can clean it up like this. Get all the paint out of there. You can also use a paper towel or a cloth for this if you like. But you want to get everything nice and clean, including the brushes. Rinse those out and set them on a cloth to dry, or a paper towel. Make sure they're nice and clean. Now, I've cleaned the palette up. You want to go through now and check each of the colors. I'm doing this with a tissue. If there's any standing water in there, when you close the lid up and move it around, that color will spread all over the place, and when you open the palette again, you'll have a mess. So what I do is check through the colors like this if I'm going to close the palette up. Make sure the colors are clean, that no other colors have seeped into the wrong wells. I'm going to tap the colors, make sure there's no standing water in there. And then when you close the palette up, the next time you open it, the colors probably won't be moist, but they won't be cracked and dry either. Then you just spray them with paint and you're ready to go again. All the palettes should have a lid on them. That way you can save your paint from one painting session to another. Check out the video that I did on brushwork and on mixing colors. I think you'll find those helpful. So this is Dennis Pendleton saying, until next time, keep on painting.